Oh, I grew up in Los Angeles. My parents moved from New York, Brooklyn, and raised a family in Los Angeles. And I was born in the mid-50s and grew up in the 60s and 70s. And Hollywood and Silver Lake, downtown LA, and I hung out with my friends and got in trouble. I was in a gang, and I was dyslexic and I couldn't read. And it was kind of interesting that I learned a lot because of that, and I grew a lot because of that. And the trouble I got into, I don't look back and think, wow, I'm glad it happened. But sometimes I realize that without that pain and the discomfort of growing up on the streets, kicked out of school. At one point, my father was in jail, and that taught me a lot. And because of those hardships, I kind of learned to sort of direct my life in ways that I don't think I would have been able to do without that. I understand the hardships of people at my age today because of that upbringing. My parents had a very challenging life, but they were loving and kind to their children, and they worked very hard despite many losses, failures, both in jobs and homes, and my sister being very sick with diabetes. And there's actually that experience that sort of gave me some direction to go into medicine. My sister had a child when she was young and not married, and my parents supported my sister and loved her and helped raise Justin, my nephew, who helped my parents in their last years of life and took care of them at home. And I think that family that I had, despite the hardships that they had and the faults that I lived through, there was always love and always patience and acceptance. And I remember one time when I was 16, I worked at a department store, the Broadway, and I was driving my grandmother's Impala home. And I was a pretty recent driver, and I was coming home from working in the department store, probably about 11 o'clock at night, and I was a hard worker. And my grandmother actually, Angelina, she got me the job. And I was pulled over by a motorcycle policeman in Los Angeles. And inside the glove compartment was some medications from my grandmother. And the police officer put me against the chain link fence and searched me and put me in handcuffs. Eventually he let me go and didn't give me a ticket, realizing it was my grandmother's medications. When I got home, I told my father the story. My father called the policeman who came to my house and apologized. It made me realize how much my father really loved me and cared for me, and it actually gave me a tremendous amount of respect for that police officer. That he would take the time and come home and to my home and apologize, because I really had nothing wrong. Didn't know why he pulled me over, actually. But realizing that we have to be more loving and kind. And I never held any anger for the officer, but my father was angry that he treated his son that way, but it was solved in a very kind way. And I think I live with that each and every day, realizing that no matter who you are, you have to be patient, loving, kind. I know that in order to get that job, my grandmother pulled some strings when I was 16. And that was one of the most important jobs that I've ever had at the department store. I learned about hard work, customer service. And I think that's really been an important thing for my life, is how to treat customers, which are really people in front of you. And I think that's how I practice my life today, that each and every one of us must be treated the same way, with respect and kindness. Well, maybe it starts back in high school when I found myself in a pottery class, ceramics. I couldn't get into the Spanish class because it was full. I needed a class, and that was the only class available. And Mrs. Wong was the teacher. And I had never had an art class in years, since I was probably in kindergarten or first grade. And she really supported me in that class, and I thrived in art. And it gave me something that felt good, accomplishment, centering. At the time, I wasn't very focused on school. I had failed algebra, history, and so studying in school wasn't my focus at the time. After high school, I still worked at the department store, which I was a hard worker, and that was the thing that I think I focused on more than anything, and my pottery. And then I took jewelry class, which again, I was really good with my hands. Not so good, I think, with the schooling, as I said. But I broke my leg in my first year of junior college at Los Angeles City College. And I met a doc. I was kind of young, hippie, family practice. I thought, wow, that looks kind of cool. I wonder what it takes to do that. So I went to the counselor's office and I looked at the requirements, and there was a lot of English and history. There was some math and science, which thankfully I was good at math. Even though I failed in high school, my failure is because I didn't focus and apply myself. But ultimately, I put my mind and my mission to being a doctor. And my experience with my sister, having diabetes since she was age 4, and seeing what my parents went through to help take care of her, and the inspiration from this doc at the hospital who was just really kind, easygoing, kind of a hippie it was in the mid 70s. I graduated high school in 74, so this was about 76 at the time. And I needed to take a lot of classes I hadn't taken before. So that was really my drive and direction to start it, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do. Although, interesting enough, I started junior college as an economics major, and once I started the class, I thought, wow, this is doesn't make any sense to me. So I focused on ceramics, calligraphy, design, and art. And Mr. Kelly was my other ceramics professor, who also was very supportive. And it was through building and making things with my hands, but a dream and a mission to become a physician. And my real dream was to become a family practice doc, to help. And help someone like my sister get through the challenges of diabetes and other health conditions. How and why did I decide to start CNY Fertility? How did I even get into the fertility business? How did I decide to become an obstetrician and gynecologist? So it goes back. And as I decided to become a physician, and went 4 years to junior college and then 2 years to the University of Southern California, and then didn't get into medical school the first year. That was challenging. But I'm a persistent person. I retook the MCATS exam to get into medical school and redid my application. I actually ended up getting into Albany Med and moved out to New York in 1981. Drove my 66 Volkswagen Bug across the country with my friend Jim, dropped him off in Ithaca, and then I went down to Manhattan, to the city, and hung out with my Aunt Mary. And 2 days before I got accepted to Albany Med, I got accepted to UC Davis. It didn't start for another month, and it was about a quarter of the price. Boy, was I happy. And it was back near my family, which was really important. So, 3 days, drove myself all the way back to Los Angeles, gathered my stuff, and up to UC Davis for medical school. Really loved the experience. Medical school was so much fun. Great people, Dave, Con, Sue, Susie, just great friends in a great place, small town, and really loved it. That's when I first learned about cold weather, because growing up in LA, never had a jacket, really, sweaters. But it got so cold I needed long johns in Davis, which was kind of funny. Now I know cold in upstate New York. Wasn't really back then. But when I was in my third year of medical school, I really enjoyed the clinical rotation in obstetrics and gynecology, delivering babies, surgeries, primary care. And the docs doing it were having so much fun. At the time, I really had no experience in the infertility world. We didn't really have anyone specializing in that at the time, and IVF wasn't practiced there at the time. So my real drive was to go into obstetrics and gynecology. I wanted to live back in Los Angeles because LA was the place I wanted to be. My family was there. And my wife at the time, Gina, wanted to be back there with her family. And so there we go, back to LA. And interesting enough, I applied for an OB/GYN residency in Los Angeles, and only for a few, but I didn't get in. That was hard. I was like, gee, what happened? Well, I only applied to 2 programs in LA, and I decided I wanted to be in LA more than I wanted to go to the OB/GYN program. So I did a year of internal medicine. UCLA, Sepulveda VA, Cedars-Sinai. Great experience. Internal medicine, I hadn't really spent as much time doing, but it really gave me some great, amazing experience in acute medicine, the ICU, emergency medicine, and also in chronic care of diabetes, hypertension, and many other diseases that I realized at the time, you know what? This isn't where I want to be. I got a call from USC, opening in OB/GYN, moved right over. And that's sort of the path back into obstetrics and gynecology. Interesting enough, when I take one path, quite often something else opens up, and I've been very open and dedicated to those new paths, even when things seem like failures, like not getting into medical school the first time, not getting into the residency that I wanted. Interesting enough, when I was in that 1 year of OB/GYN at LA County Women's Hospital, it was only a 1-year spot. So at the end of the year, they didn't have a spot for a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year. So I wound up going to Colorado, and it was a great experience. Got a chance to ski. My daughter Pilar was born there, and developed some more great friends and colleagues. From there, I decided to go to Kaiser in Sacramento and practice obstetrics and gynecology at Kaiser. And that's where I met Kurt Klooster, who's the doc who inspired me to go into fertility as a profession. As I was delivering babies, doing surgery, primary obstetrical and gynecologic care, Dr. Klooster was doing a tremendous amount of infertility. And I was his right-hand guy at the time, and I was learning a lot and practicing a lot. No IVF at the time. And then I got a call from Bo Sue, who was a doc in Los Angeles at Harbor UCLA, and they just started an REI program there. And I got a call, asked me if I wanted to do that, which was kind of out of the blue. I wasn't thinking of it at the time. But all these things happened to be in my life that just come about. And there it was, another opportunity. And it was getting me back to Los Angeles, is where I wanted to be. And at the time, my mother-in-law, Lucille, wound up getting cancer and dying, so being with family was really important. While I was there learning about reproductive endocrinology, being a fertility expert, the riots in LA hit, and I realized I didn't want to live in LA anymore. It's a crazy place. It's great people, but I realized that that's not where I wanted to raise my daughter, Pilar, at the time. She was about, 4 or 5 years old at the time. And it was, okay, where are we going to go? Now I had to look for a job as a fertility specialist. And I wasn't finding the right one. Didn't feel right. I took a job at Alta Bates in the Bay Area, which was a great experience doing primarily in vitro fertilization. I took a position as a volunteer faculty at the University of San Francisco, UCSF, and I really loved those two things. But ultimately, still something wasn't feeling right. I think it was still California, the crowds, the traffic, and growing up in LA, I was feeling a desire for more rural now. Plus, I found that I wasn't loving just being in a specialized practice of fertility. I wanted to get back to primary obstetrics, gynecology. So I searched across the country, looked in the Northeast, the Northwest, the Midwest, and I found a job in Auburn, New York, doing obstetrics, gynecology, and opening up an IVF program and practicing fertility. So that's how I got to Central New York. And I was delivering babies, and I opened up an IVF program. But ultimately, that too didn't work out. Or it worked out the way it was meant to be. And from my years of working at the Broadway department store and always working extra hard to get through the history classes, the English classes, because I wasn't good at comprehension and reading, but I was good in the biology, science, and math classes. My father was in business and he was a serial entrepreneur. Never thought I wanted to do my own business. But I finally realized when the job in Auburn didn't work out after 18 months, it was time to do it on my own. That's when I started CNY Fertility, 1997. I moved from Auburn to Syracuse, started a practice which did obstetrics, gynecology, and the first successful IVF program in Central New York. I went to the bank. I developed a Excel spreadsheet and wrote up a business proposal, took it to the bank, borrowed $150,000, and it was like, okay, here I go. I'm on my own. I'm the one that has to now take the responsibility of making this work. And I was so jazzed and energized to make it happen. Now, I had lots of help. Support from my wife at the time, Gina. Support from the hospital. One of the CFOs at the time, I'm not remembering his name, Tom Quinn. He gave me that Excel spreadsheet, and I took it home and I just blew it up, changed it, made it mine. And I was really energized to do that and excited. Tom Romano loaned me office space for 3 months without rent because I had no money at the time. That was really just, a lot of people came together and helped make this happen. And my patients, some of my patients came from Auburn and helped me start my practice. After about a year of delivering babies, I was getting so busy in the fertility business, I had to give up the delivering babies, which I loved very much. The most wonderful thing in the world is helping a mom-to-be deliver that baby in a healthy way. Most of the time it was natural, vaginal. Occasionally we had to do a C-section. But whatever it took, it was really the most amazing thing for me because I developed a tremendous number of very personal relationships. And for me, medicine, healthcare is about a personal relationship. It's not the delivery, the success or the failure, but it really is about the connection between the patient and myself, which I love to call the client. And so many times we became friends. And I still remember so many of those patients from long ago. Eventually I stopped gynecology and we became so big that we had to move into a larger facility. My dream was a small boutique practice. I never imagined that CNY Fertility would have 6 locations, would integrate a spa, Eastern, Western medicine, seeing clients from around the country and the globe. So I feel blessed each and every day that I'm able to help men and women, couples, individuals that are going through the struggle of infertility. CNY Fertility and I have chosen to offer IVF and fertility care at a more affordable price. Because having a baby, building a family, is really a very basic foundation for everyone. And currently, and for years, fertility care has been poorly covered by insurance, mostly uncovered for most. And when it comes to IVF, it's out of reach for 85% of those in need. That never made sense to me. Interesting enough, I used to deliver babies and get paid about $2,000 for 9 months of care and a delivery at 2 in the morning. So when I started my practice and was trying to figure out the pricing for IVF, $2,000 seemed pretty fair. That's how I started, at that price. I didn't look at what others were charging because that doesn't seem right. It really is. I'm offering a service. And what can I do to make it the most affordable? That was my real mission. Access, affordability, but most of all, quality. So that $2,000 price point has grown to $3,900 for our self-pay IVF. But one of the things that I realized for so many people is they couldn't afford that out of pocket, that $3,900 plus meds and plus travel or whatever it is. So that's when we decided to offer in-house financing for everyone. No qualifications, doesn't matter. And that's worked really well for us over the last several years. And I'm really proud that CNY Fertile Financing has helped so many. We're now working to get to the next levels, offering medications, travel, and other things to help them. But I'm really proud that just thousands of individuals, couples have been able to afford that success because of that. And we all know that in general, cars, houses, consumer credit is so important for us. At CNY Fertility, we don't screen our patients whether or not they qualify to be a parent and whether or not we should allow them to have treatment for infertility. Ultimately, it's an individual decision for the patient. And if they come to us, our job is to help them. And what are the limiting factors? Age, other diseases, size, ovarian function, sperm function. But our job is to work with each and every individual and couple to give them information of the best options, the odds of success or failure, talk about the finances, insurance coverage, no insurance coverage. But really it's, what can we do to help you have a successful outcome? And one of the things I've learned over the years that if you've got a medical condition that might increase your risk with pregnancy, maybe we should look at ways of reducing the risk by helping take care of the health problems. And that's one of the things that we've really come to focus on is how to reduce inflammation, integrate Eastern with Western medicine, because they're so powerful together. And as a Western trained doctor, we really never learned about Eastern medicine. Kind of, it wasn't scientifically proven in a randomized controlled study in a medical journal. we should probably toss it aside. But I've seen so many patients, doesn't matter the age, the size, the past history. We've seen successes. And all anyone wants is the opportunity to try. I usually say do. You got to do something in order to get something. Do or do not, as Master Yoda once said, there be no try. And that's where we brought in a lot of my mind-body smile, where about 15 years ago, I was seeing patients get pregnant that I couldn't get pregnant. And they were doing acupuncture, massage, yoga. And I was like, gee, what is that? I've never experienced it. So that's when I really began to ask the questions, experience it for myself, and even step back when success was happening, but the journals and the articles didn't support it. To be more open to the possibilities. As a standard American doctor, I was beginning to realize that we're closed-minded. And interesting enough, that we were looking more at Eastern medicine, I was beginning to look more at meditation and prayer and spirituality. And realizing that in the connection with the human being in front of us, there are ways that we can all treat each other and listen and learn and love. And so Mind, Body, Smile was where I began my daily intentions. I would do a daily written intention, and then I'd video it and share it with the world, which helped me in sharing a story of integrating that Eastern concept. And that's where C&Y Healing Arts grew out of. Sort of the failures of Western medicine and looking over at the Eastern fields and seeing something come up and spending some time there. And realizing that without bringing them in-house, it wasn't working as well. We wanted to be encouraging and share the opportunities with everyone. I kind of became labeled as Dr. Guru, which I think I was a little taken aback by it. He's not science. But the more I dug deep into the Eastern philosophy, I realized the power that it is science. And that's where I began to dig into the science of the mind and the science of thought. And why prayer, meditation, yoga, massage, and acupuncture really worked. It's that human touch. Well, so I spent a lot of time talking about the mind, intentions, meditation, prayer. Didn't talk about food at all. Didn't understand the connection between food and the function of the body. Probably about 10 years ago, several of my patients were getting pregnant when I couldn't get them pregnant, or they didn't miscarry where they usually would. And I come to find out that they were practicing a new eating plan called Paleo. I was like, what is this? In Paleo, I began to read about it and learn more about natural whole foods from the land, recently hunted and gathered, Paleolithic caveman. And from there, I come to learn about the ketogenic diet. And what is that? You burn ketones after You burn sugar first. I learned about keto. Most of us believe that we burn sugar as our primary source of energy. And then when we shift to fat burning, the ketones are the primary source of energy. I was fascinated by this story to learn more about the physiology and the function of the body. And I came up with the idea that we're really human Ferraris. Valuable, expensive, irreplaceable, unique. But something didn't make sense. We burn sugar and then we burn fat. And as I began to look closer and closer to understand how food changes what goes on in our bodies, inflammation came up time and time and time again. Interesting, I learned long ago. So maybe the question really is, why is it so complicated? Right? Is inflammation the cause of our diseases, or is it something mysterious? And that's the part that I never understood about our bodies. So my sister died of diabetes, Marianne, and my best friend Dave Kilmer died of cancer, both at 52. Now my sister had diabetes since age 4, but Dave Kilmer was always an athlete, healthy, positive, an amazing man. In medical school, he always loved to go running. So I always tried to go running with him. Never could keep up. I actually could probably run about a half a mile and I was done. So my point about how did they get diabetes and die? How did Dave get cancer and die? Where did it come from? We really never talked about inflammation in any of our educational seminars about diseases. Diabetes is caused by a virus or insulin resistance. Cancer is caused by a carcinogen. But they're so mysterious. They're like a handful, but somehow you must have been exposed by some of these things, or must be in the family. It's genetic. But as I read and read and read more about ketogenic diets, inflammation came up more and more and more. And it really sparked my excitement and interest. I became a little kid. As I read more and more about inflammation, it sparked my interest and I became like a little kid, so excited. This makes sense. I was on the beach in Cabo. I downloaded a book by Thomas Seyfried called Cancer is a Metabolic Disorder. That changed my life. When I learned that cancer is likely caused by glucose, and that glycation is the abnormal binding of glucose to every cell or molecule or structure in our body that damages it and causes it to be dysfunctional, non-functional, which then causes an inflammatory reaction that even has more of an adverse effect on our body. When glucose binds to the mitochondria, which is the energy creator of the cell, when the mitochondria die, the cell dies. But interesting enough, some cells don't die because they're able to make energy in the cytoplasm from glucose, called fermentation. And Otto Warburg, almost 100 years ago, figured this out, but I had never heard this. And it makes so much sense now. The primary diets we're all recommended to eat are a high plant-based diet. Fruits, fiber, vegetables, lean meat, but not red. And it turns out that all of that is sugar. And the recommendations are to eat 3 meals a day plus snacks in between. By eating like that, you keep your metabolism going. It didn't make sense. Realize that what we're doing is filling up the digestive tract with complex carbs, fiber, fruits and vegetables, which are full of yeast and bacteria and other microorganisms that ultimately either ferment, heat, gas, aldehyde, and alcohol, which causes DNA damage. It causes protein and other cellular damage and breakdown. And we all know that the GI disorders are rampant today, but we still didn't understand it completely. And that ultimately all those carbs are secreting glucose into our bloodstream 24/7, 365. And so the real culprit is not insulin resistance, but hyperglycemia in the standard recommendations of a healthy diet, which are likely the cause of inflammation for all of us. That was the spark and the amazing change that I learned that we were never taught. And I wondered why. Infertility is mostly unexplained. That's the interesting part. Open fallopian tubes, regular cycles, you're probably ovulating, and normal-ish sperm. Unknown, unexplained, idiopathic. I come to use that term as we're idiots, because unexplained, idiopathic turns out to be inflammation. But I didn't understand why infertility. But what I began to realize is that every disease we have as a human being is caused by inflammation. Diabetes, hypertension, cancer, strokes, arthritis, dermatitis, migraines, gastrointestinal disorders, and infertility is just another disease. Interesting enough, the pelvis sits at the bottom of the bucket called the bowels, the crock. I've sometimes referred to as the crock of shit. We don't like to talk about it, but ultimately all this healthy food, variety, colors, spices, fiber, once it gets in there, it becomes a slurry of shit, which we don't understand what's going on in there. But what I come to realize is that the inflammation here affects the inflammation around the tubes, ovaries, uterus, the prostate, the seminal vesicles, the testicles. And so when you have all this inflammation that goes through the blood vessels, causes vasculitis, into the interstitial spaces of every organ we own, the damage happens from glucose, from the plant antigens that are micronized in the bowels, become dust. And they go everywhere in our body. Every nook and cranny, the dust particles are deposited in the uterus, in the tubes, in the ovaries, in the prostate, the testicles. Inflammation is stimulated because of these antigens, and an antigen is a particle that elicits an inflammatory reaction. Hay fever, a scratch, a bee sting. It's simple enough. The same things that cause redness at a spider bite, swelling, heat, or a scratch of a plant, or poison ivy, are causing the damage within our bodies, within our reproductive organs. It became so simple. Inflammation is caused primarily by the food we eat, the food we're recommended to eat, which once again a high plant-based diet, which all breaks down to sugar, plus the plant antigens, which some of us are more allergic than others. And the problem is that we don't understand why one organ gets damaged and not another, and why some people who appear to be unhealthy have plenty of babies, and others on the outside appear to be healthy, but maybe they're not. Just like our inability to know what's inside a book based on the cover, we really are misled by what we see on the outside. Quite often I see many of those that are overweight have plenty of babies, and those that are lean and appear healthy, not. It's the inflammation that's flowing through our bodies. And now understanding ways to solve that is how keto came to be the thing that I talk about the most, which I call it Kiltz's Keto. And I've added the Kiltz's Keto Cures. And I sound like a broken record quite often, but I feel like I've learned something quite amazing that we in modern medicine are ignoring. That are healthy recommendations of a high plant-based diet, frequent meals, variety and abundance is the leading cause of our disease. Well, it's interesting how I first learned about diet and food and how powerful it is with the Paleo. Patients were suddenly getting pregnant that weren't working with me. And as I learned more and more and more, and I read Gary Taubes, Good Calories, Bad Calories, Andras Eenfeldt, The Diet Doctor, Maria Emmerich on Keto, and many others. And I began to share it. But it was interesting how it wasn't easily accepted in the conversation. Food, religion, politics often isn't something we're easily convinced of a change. But as I began to talk about it, and write about it, and blog about it, and bring in other experts like Marie Emmerich, patients began to tell their stories of losing 25, 50, 100 pounds, and even without weight loss, feeling better, more energetic. Their periods became normal. They were getting pregnant. And that still didn't make sense to me until after probably over 5 years of really talking about it. And it may be longer, but I'm even more energized. More and more patients are sharing their stories on our blogs, on the CNY Fertility Facebook Live, Kiltz's Keto. All over the place, people are pregnant. And I recently had a text from a client that I just did a phone consultation, talked to them about their history and what's going on with them and how long they've been experiencing infertility. And we focused on talking about inflammation and a change in food. And they were inspired to make that change. I hadn't seen them for months and months and months or heard from them. I get a text, Dr. Kiltz, never came to see you, just that phone. Thank you very much. I'm 4 months pregnant, keto. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever learned to share, how changing what we put in here reduces the inflammation here, and it helps everything work better. Our primary drive is really more natural, less invasive, less medications, less pills, pokes, and procedures. If we can help people in a more natural way, wouldn't that be the right direction that we want to share for fertility care? But not only that, but for all other medical conditions we suffer from. Diabetes has been gone in just a few weeks. I've seen so many stories. Hypertension gone. Dr. Corley, in 4 months of keto after joining me, 40 pounds gone, hypertension gone, high cholesterol gone. And never was I taught this in medical school or residency. And most people say, no, diet, that's deadly and dangerous. And keto especially, don't do it. I suffered from kidney stones and bowel problems, migraines, joint and back problems. I did it, and wow. Nearly 63, no exercise in 10 years, and I'm just amazed how healthy we can be by doing less. I'm really excited to share the story about keto because I think it is the most valuable and important thing that we all should learn about. One of the hallmarks of keto was fatty meat, bacon and eggs. And I love acronyms. I love words. And I came up with the baby diet. Bacon, eggs, butter, beef. And I didn't know what the last one was, but I began to make ice cream. Ice cream doesn't sound like it's keto, but I learned how to make keto ice cream. Bacon, eggs, butter, beef, ice cream, baby, which really helps all of us understand a very simple concept of the foods we should eat. And really, we should narrow the food groups because variety in general is deadly and sides are deadly. And I've always said that a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or wife with sides is deadly, and variety is deadly, and spice is deadly. Boring turned out to be better, and that's where my boring diet, which is pretty much for me, I call it a food plan, by the way, because you want to have a live it plan, not a die it plan. And I've pretty much eliminated fruits, fiber, vegetables in my diet, but I'm not telling everyone that they need to do that. But what we all need to understand is that fruits, fiber, vegetables are sugars. They're likely highly contaminated with bacteria and yeast, which is deadly and dangerous for our bowels, in my opinion. I even think probiotics are a bad idea in general. The baby diet, it could be beef bacon, eggs, deviled eggs, scrambled eggs, hard-boiled eggs, over easy eggs. And the bacon could be beef bacon, pork bacon, but there's no such thing as turkey bacon. Turkey bacon is man-made. And I always say, stay away from man-made. And the interesting thing about keto and paleo compared to standard American diets, our standard American diet is probably about 70% carbohydrates, about 20% protein, and really only about 10% fats. But a keto diet is 75 to 80% fat and about 20% protein and only a small amount of carbs. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have carbs, but when we begin to understand that if you eat like a grazing animal, your carbohydrate levels are going to be higher, that means your sugar is going to be higher, and that means your insulin is going to be higher. Insulin is secreted when you have glucose in your bloodstream 24/7, 365, or at any moment that it receives glucose. The American Heart, Diabetic, and other nutritional food experts recommend that plant-based diet and grazing. I've often said that we came out of the trees to eat not the grass, but the grass eaters. I know it seems a little crass and crude to some, but my intention is to really help us understand that we are a fat-making and a fat-burning machine. Without fat, we die. In fact, anorexics die fast. Obesity is slow because the problem is not the fat, it's the constant carbs and sugar that's raised in our bloodstream that causes the damage. My recommendation, Kiltz's Keto, is that one meal a day at night to rest and digest, because the bowels really need rest to allow the blood flow and natural digestion to take place. My general recommendation is don't eat your next meal until night the next day, so you get a 24-hour fasting, which I call intermittent feasting. Fast, 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 feast. Our bodies are meant to go days and weeks without food, hours and days without water, and but a few minutes without air. Why were we made this way? Because in general, food is hard to find. Today, it's delivered to your home in 2 minutes from an app. Our cupboards and our freezers and fridge contain far more than we need in our day. And the supermarkets are super packed with superfoods, which are super fucking us up. I'm sorry. We have been led down the primrose path to disease. The farms grow the food that get us sick, that require the pharmaceuticals to make us better, but they never do. The health care costs in America are exploding. Why? The recommendations of our healthcare industry, unfortunately, I believe, is leading us in the wrong direction. Kiltz's Keto, high fat, not a high protein diet, a low carb diet. But we have to accentuate the high fat, and in my opinion, it's natural fats, animal fats, preferably. But if you're a vegan or vegetarian, vegans, coconut, hemp oils. I stay away from a lot of the seed and nut oils because they're highly antigenic and they're industrial fats. And for the vegetarians, cream, butter, and eggs. There's a lot there, but it's meant to be simple. The more we simplify, we narrow, that arrow will hit the target for our health and wellness that we all so search for. And I've always said, you actually already have the most amazing human body. You just have to change the fuel. Diet, like religion and politics and culture, is ancient. It's very difficult to change our ancient habits of food, culture, social gatherings. But when you're suffering from a disease, you want to become a very narrow eater because you want to solve something that's bothering you. Rather than drugs, pills, potions, or procedures, why not we look towards natural, healthy foods? I go to a very narrow diet because I wanted to prove something and understand something about really the human body requires 0 carbohydrates in our diet. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate ever. The minerals and vitamins we really get mostly come from fatty meat, liver, bone marrow, organ meats, but the fat. So my diet is a fatty ribeye steak with butter, occasionally a French fry, fresh potato fried in duck grease or tallow or lard, beautiful, with Malden salt. Some simple sugars actually turn out, I believe, to be better in a small amount because the simple sugars are digested quickly, taken into the bloodstream, the hepatic portal system to the liver, where insulin from the pancreas converts it quickly to fat. That's why the simple sugars, I believe, in small amounts from time to time, are less deadly and dangerous and may actually be okay compared to the complex carbs of fruits and vegetables. Paleo diets contain a little bit more plant material, but narrow, mostly above ground. And if you read Anders Seinfeld, Diet Doctor, you understand that a little bit better. Marie Emmerich, I think, is a little bit more paleo, but she certainly is sharing the idea of ketogenic lifestyle and healthy living, very important. We can easily digest the carbs, in my opinion, that are cooked, simplified, and you add cream, butter, or coconut milk in order to make a soup, which can be very tasty. And it's okay from time to time for the vegans and vegetarians, spread out the meals to 12 to 24 hours. The standard eaters, again, you may choose to eat anything you want, a lot of everything and anything, but remember, spice and variety is deadly. If you're suffering from something, realize that food allergies are rampant. Contaminated food, lettuce, fruit and vegetables, I call it nature's toilet paper, contaminated. Triple washed lettuce constantly being recalled. When was the last time you saw a ribeye steak being recalled? And one of the reasons I don't recommend tenderloin or lean meats, because what most people don't understand, that protein breaks down to amino acids in the gut, that goes to the liver. Insulin is required to convert amino acids to sugar, then fat. Without that, we die. That's the amazing story here. We really don't need much protein. We need fat. And the story for the last 50 years or more has been stay away from fat, stay away from saturated fat, stay away from animal fat, stay away from red meat, bad. Wrong. And then if you read Gary Taub's books, Why We Get Fat, Good Calories, Bad Calories, The Case Against Sugar, you'll see the story is powerful. We require lots of oxygen. My bet is less water than we're pounding down today. Maybe we'll save the oceans and every place from all this plastic. And a lot of fat. We're made of air, water, salt, and fat. We only have about a tablespoon of sugar floating through our bloodstream. That's the amazing story.
Can provide.
What does the world need most that I can provide? I think we all need it. Love, acceptance. And I think there's a lot of lack of love in each and every one of us, especially to ourselves. And when we can learn to find it, we best can do that by sharing love, gratitude, kindness. Without love, you might have all the food in the world. You might have all the health in the world. And that's why much of my focus is on what we put in the mind and what are we thinking about. If we can think love. And one of my heroes was Leo Buscaglia. He was a USC professor that I remembered in the 70s was always on a talk show and sharing his love. He was an Italian that loved to eat, talk about his mama. And I think I was inspired by his words, love. I received a tremendous amount of love from my parents, my family. And no matter what, failures on my side, missteps, bad behavior, my parents loved me. And that's the part that I've learned more and more through many of the hardships I've experienced in my life. separation, divorce, death, loss, failure. I've learned that we each have to share love within ourselves. Look in the mirror every morning, simply say, I love you. And then spread that to everyone else you see in this world. The more we can do that, acceptance, forgiveness, that's what we must live 24/7, 365. And yet realizing we all have moments where we go a little nuts and crazy. Forgive me, I'm back again. So as a dyslexic non-reader growing up, I hated to read. Picture books were my favorite. But in my 40s and 50s, I became a voracious reader. And a few books have inspired me in life. One was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, the little shepherd boy on the journey. Stephen Covey, legacy, learning, living and loving. But you know, Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now was probably one of the best that I really learned to love, and it's how do you live today in the best way you can with all the things we've talked about, love, kindness, generosity, patience, listening. I really don't think about a legacy at all. I have no sort of, gee, I want to leave this, because ultimately we all become dust. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. And one of my favorite philosophers is Jesus Christ. When we live with love and forgiveness, and I've heard the words non-judgment, but that's impossible. What I learned to use is judge with love. I think the best thing I can do is just share who I am today and help build families, encourage people on a path of health and wellness. Powerful for me. It's sort of my drive and dream each and every day. Seeing my fertility may or may not be around in 20, 40, 60, 100 years. But I know that what I'm doing today matters, and what I love to do is share the voice of integration, Eastern, Western, of faith and patience and love. Maybe that's just the simple legacy that I wish to leave, that I was living a good life.